The swim I'm fishing in this session is actually quite weedy, and although I've been fishing to clear gravel margins with my left and middle rod, my right hand rod I've been fishing with PVA bags, solid bags. And what I want to do now is just run through quickly the rig that I use and the way I've been fishing those bags. So I've got some dark matter tubing. This is weedy green, and I've got about 18 inches of that on there. A tail rubber, and then I've got a flat inline pair. Now this is the significant bit. As I've mentioned already, I'm really keen on getting shot of that lead. So this is a drop-off system. So the way I'm setting it up is I've got a tail rubber on the end of my tungsten tubing. I push the tail of the flat inline pair into that tail rubber. Nice and wet first, slide it in there. And then I've got a size 11 ring swivel, which I put a cut down tail rubber on the end, and I push that neatly into the front end of that flat inline pair, and then I pull the line tight. And that forms an absolutely fantastic drop-off system. Get a fish on there, it pops out, and the lead drops off. Now it's really easy to fish that in a solid bag. So what I do now is just run through that setup. But before I do, I'll just show you the actual rig setup. I've got a link clip, a short length of Supernatural hook link. That is then tied to a trusty size 6 wide gape and a little bit of shrink tube on the eye just to kick it round. And then I've got a fish meal boilie, which is actually a critically balanced fish meal boilie, and I've trimmed that down, and that's what I'm going to fish inside my bag. So a really tidy little bag setup, and the beauty of it is you get a fish on, the lead's gone. So once again, you're playing a fish without the complication of having a lead hanging about. So I'm going to use a small solid bag. Here we go. So the first job is to get it opened up. I like to mix the pellets up that I'm going to fish in my bag. So I'll start off with some of these small sturgeon pellets, which are commercially available for the ornamental trade. You could use a little carp pellet or a little trout pellet, and then I'm going to add my hook link. Now obviously this bit can be a bit fiddly and it takes a bit of practice. I'm not a brilliant PVA bag fisherman myself, but I've got friends that can tie these up incredibly tidy and very quickly, but it's not that tricky, and once you practice it a little bit you can kind of get the hang of it. So the trick is to get that hook bait right down into one of the corners, and then you need the hook to be lying away from that. Now the setup I'm going to do effectively will end up with the lead in there, the hook link wrapped round like it's shown there, and the lead. Just then add a few pellets, and really you can add pretty much anything to this. I feel like I'm doing a cooking program now. I put a few pellets in, but if you've got a particular pellet combination that you're really keen to use, I think it's important to mix the size of the pellets up. If fish are just picking up one size pellet, then possibly they become a little bit conditioned to that. The other thing with those little sturgeon pellets is they're a little bit different. I don't see many people using them. So by being a bit different, that might give you a little bit of an edge. And you can see that I'm slowly filling the bag up. I'm holding the lead and the tail rubber right at the top of the bag, and that's where I'm going to wrap it around as we fill. So a few more of the little sturgeon pellets in there. So it starts to get a bit fiddly when you're trying to get it in there. These little filling scoops that come with the solid bags make a big difference. They're really useful actually. Really help you to get the rig in there properly. Try and pack that pellet in nice and tight. And the beauty of having the small pellets in there is they leave very little air space. They pack in nice and tight. A few more pellets that side. And work them round that lead so you're getting a nice tidy parcel. And you can sort of see it starting to take shape now. So hook baits down here, rigs snaking back and forth, top end of that lead, a little bit more pellet, and then we'll tie it off. In my experience, carp absolutely love trout pellets, salmon pellets, halibut pellets, and any of these could be used in this little setup. And the beauty of this is you could cast this into the thickest weed bed and still have a pretty good chance of hooking a fish. And mark my word, any carp worth its salt will find this when it's buried in the middle of a weed bed, because it'll give off a hell of a lot of smell. You can pull that neck of the bag nice and tight and then twist it round. And you can see you're forming the bag beautifully there, and the lead's right in the middle. Now what I tend to do at this stage, give my fingers a bit of a wet, not too much, otherwise obviously the bag starts to break down. Give it a nice turn and just hold that for a second. You can see that's a really solid bag, and you can imagine that bombing down into the weed. Now just to finish it off, a bit more moisture on that neck, to tighten it up nice and tight. If you're going for a big distance cast at this stage, you can start folding the corners around as well. I'm not going to. So there's pretty much my finished bag. Now what I want to do for a little bit of extra security is I've got some quick melt solid PVA tape here. And what I'm going to do is pull a little bit of that off. And just for added security on the cast, really. Just wrap that round there a couple of times. Pull it tight. And knot the top of the bag. Not always necessary, but I tend to be a bit of a negative person when it comes to my PVA bag fishing, so I think it's quite good to get a little bit of extra security on there. Get rid of those ends. Seal it all off. Lovely job. How tidy is that? Now you imagine casting that into a thick weed bed. The bag's going to go punching in, find its way to the bottom very quickly. It'll then start to break down. You've got the tubing behind, the tungsten dark matter tubing behind it, so everything's nicely camouflaged. That'll land in amongst the weed or on the bed of the lake, start to break down. Now there's hundreds and hundreds of those little pellets in there, and maybe 100 of the bigger pellets in there. They're all breaking down, giving off loads of smell up into the water column, and carp will home in on that from a great distance away. So it's a very effective setup. You can see that a solid bag setup like that is an absolutely fantastic way of catching carp. I've got friends that will use these wherever they go and pretty much nothing else. So if you're in doubt, feeling a bit unconfident with a weedy area in front of you, try a solid bag.